All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 97, I want us to say. Something like that. It involves daily and vlogging. So, today, um, I want to talk about roguelikes. Specifically, so I have been not doing well recently. I've been spending most of every day in bed. I'll only get out for, I don't know, a couple hours maybe, long enough to record a vlog. And one of the things I do to keep myself entertained is I have my Switch. And I also have my, I can remote play my PS5 on my tablet. And so those are kind of the things that I do when I'm in bed. And I have recently gotten kind of re-addicted to roguelikes in general. Like I've got Vampire Survivors on my Switch. Vampire Survivors is amazing. Such a great game. There's a crap ton of content for it now too. Like I got Vampire Survivors, I think when it was still in early access. It was late in early access, but still there. And then I stopped playing it after, I think, like the second paid expansion came out. And then I picked it up on my Switch with everything, and wow, there's a lot of stuff there. But anyway, so I've been playing that, and then on PS5 for PS Plus, this month, you get a bunch of you get 3 free games every month. One of the games was this game called Skull the Hero Slayer or something like that. Another roguelike, which is fantastic and phenomenal and super fun. Basically, you play a skeleton who can replace his skull with other skulls, and each one has different abilities and powers and stuff like that, and plays just completely differently. It's massively fun. So I got to thinking, I've been a roguelike fan forever. I was a huge fan of, what was it, the Hades? Hades was so good. Obviously, I've played Vampire Survivors, what was it, Rogue, something. I've played a lot of them. To the point where I've even, like, I'll have these kicks where I will just get really into roguelikes for a while, and then I'll just play over and over, like 8-Bit Dungeon and all these other things. And then I'll get tired with them and I'll move on to something else. But so it got me thinking about, because everything in this channel has to do with tabletop RPGs in some way, shape, or form. It got me thinking about, first of all, are there any roguelike tabletop RPGs? Because to me, that sounds like something really fun. And with how popular roguelikes have been for over a decade at this point, I'm like, surely somebody has to have done that. And so I did a very quick Google search with just TTRPG roguelikes and found Bubkiss. I did find a Reddit thread where somebody asked the literal same question, hey, are there any TTRPG roguelikes? And the response I got was effectively, well, you can use these systems to kind of create your own roguelikes. And the one that came up first was Dungeon Crawl Classics. If you're not familiar with Dungeon Crawl Classics, it's basically a modern version of old school, like pre-first edition basic D&D. Which I own. I own a bunch of Dungeon Crawl Classics books in PDF form and a bunch of adventures. Not a fan of that particular system because that was back then. D&D, D&D was don't get attached to your character until at least 5th level, and it was very much kind of a combat simulator that was heavily stacked against the players. Very high death count. Lots of tables that you had to roll on, very limited classes and things like that. Like if you were a fighter, you were like a fighter was a fighter was a fighter was a fighter. A wizard was a wizard was a wizard was a wizard. And there really wasn't a lot of kind of customizability or anything aside from, you know, this fighter might use a bow and that one might use a greatsword. But overall, very homogenous. Again, it was the beginning. And people claim, and the people in the post were claiming, well, there's a lot of death that happens in Dungeon Crawl Classics, and that's, you know, that would definitely be how a roguelike works. Which to me kind of shows how little that commenter understands what a roguelike is. There was a suggestion that got me intrigued that I might pick this up eventually. There is a game, I think it's called Rhapsody in Blood. I'm going to check real quick. Rhapsody of Blood. There we go. I think that's what it is. Before I say the wrong thing, I'm going to check it out. Yep, that's the thing I was thinking of. So, there is a game called Rhapsody of Blood, and it's effectively kind of... it's your kind of gothic horror, vampire-esque tabletop RPG, but it's designed so that you effectively play generations of the same family, and what happens in the previous generation affects what happens to the next one. Is what the pitch is. I have not played this game. I don't know the mechanics, so I don't know how accurate that is a description. But it's interesting, and it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. So again, I've talked about those a lot on this channel. The current Designing New Dragons series that I'm doing uses a Powered by the Apocalypse game called Avatar Legends. So I'm familiar with Apocalypse World and the Powered by Apocalypse systems. And to me, it's a step in the right direction if it works the way that it's described. Again, I haven't played the game, so I don't know mechanically how it works. But if it works the way the game has been described, then it would kind of give off a roguelike feel, but it kind of misses the point of what a roguelike is. Probably because Rhapsody of Blood is not meant to be a roguelike. It just has been compared to that. So I got to thinking, if I were to design a tabletop RPG roguelike, what kind of things would be necessary to play? And so that's what I wanted to make my video about now that we're 8 minutes into the video, is just kind of brainstorming things that would make an interesting tabletop RPG roguelike. And I could very much see ideas like this being used to create what's called an RPG in a box, like of Mice and Mystics. It's a board game that has a lot of RPG elements, or way over here, my D&D Adventure series board games. Those are what are called RPGs in a box, because they basically have a lot of the mechanics of an RPG without being an actual tabletop RPG. They're significantly more limited. Like the D&D Adventure System games use, for the most part, kind of use the 4th edition combat rules. But you have pre-chosen characters with pre-chosen abilities. They can level up, but they only gain 1 level until you get to the Temple of Elemental Evil board game. And that one actually allows you to continue your progress over multiple adventures. So I could definitely see a TTRPG roguelike being sold more as an RPG in a box style board game. But I also think it could be really, really cool to have a roguelike campaign. And I don't think it would be incredibly difficult to create. I just don't think, like, in that the thread that I talked about on Reddit, most of it was about, well, you could kind of jury rig a system into this game system, or you could jury rig a roguelike into this system, and I don't think that works particularly well with how a roguelike is supposed to work. So, first of all, let's kind of define what a roguelike is. Roguelike, the term itself comes from a game back in, I want to say, like the late 80s or mid 80s called Rogue. And it was kind of an RPG, but basically every time you died, you'd be able to restart and have some sort of bonus based on what happened in your previous game. That's kind of the root of roguelikes. Is death is expected, there's constant progress, and there's some aspect of procedural generation. Like, those are the three things that make a roguelike. Now, there's also a term called roguelite. We're not going to even play with that, but those would be the three things that I would want. There has to be an aspect of death being a regular occurrence, but not the end of the story or anything like that. There would have to be an overarching system where your next character gets some sort of benefit from the things that your previous character did, or something like that. And there would need to be some sort of procedurally generated aspect to it. All of which are already fairly possible in TTRPGs in general. So I think the most difficult thing to create would be a character creation system that takes into account your previous character. And my thought for that would be roguelikes in general tend to kind of work under the idea that you can have a bunch of different classes or builds or things like that, but the builds themselves tend to be very simple and very specialized. If you look at something like Dead Cells, you get a main weapon, a sub weapon, and then two kind of gadgets. And that is your entire build. Now, those can change as you find new ones throughout there, and they can upgrade and stuff like that. But basically, you have 4 options throughout your run. That might change, but that's really it. If we look at Skull, the Hero Slayer, you will have an attack, you have a dodge that sometimes is changed, and then you have up to 2 abilities built into that. And in Skull, you can actually switch between 2 skulls, so each one of those has that. So I think for a TTRPG roguelike, you would need a fair amount of classes that you could play as. The larger the number, the better. However, unlike something like D&D, where you have these very, very complex classes that go from 1 to 20, and there's subclasses and all those things like that, and especially once you start getting to higher levels, you just have this just conglomerate of different things that you can do. I think the class system or build system, it could be skill-based as well, would have to be your basic character would be relatively limited. I would say, each class would have kind of a defining feature or something like it, and then probably like a couple choices that maybe more choices unlock as you get further generations down. But it wouldn't be massively complex. You would probably have, your basic way to attack, which would probably be related to the defining feature of the class. And then maybe total throughout the life of that particular character, you might get 6 different abilities. And those might be chosen from maybe a dozen and a half different abilities total per class. So from a design perspective, that means making the classes themselves is going to be significantly easier than trying to create full-blown classes that are designed to go from like 1 to 10 or 1 to 20 and have to have balance issues and things like that. I think that could work really, really well and would give that feeling of a roguelike. Now, as far as the kind of reincarnation system or whatever, the overarching, I think that would need to be kind of a separate character, effectively. If you look at, like, Essence 20, since that's a big thing, if we look at Power Rangers, you have the roles themselves, which are very kind of contained. And then you have the various different perks, which is Essence 20's version of feats, which for the most part, a lot of RPGs have feat systems. They've existed since 3rd edition in 2000. A lot of different RPGs have picked them up. And they're basically an additional customization option that exists outside of the class system. And I think that's what would work best for a TTRPG roguelike, would be the idea that your character sheet, like the initial thing, would have your feats or whatever, would be one aspect, and then the actual character would be a much smaller kind of separate sheet, so that every time you start over new, you would always have this overarching sheet, and then each new character, you would kind of slot in a new tiny character sheet that would that would be your abilities for that particular generation. And I think that would work pretty well and be a pretty interesting system. It would mean that it would kind of be a combination of a skill-based and class-based RPG, very similar to kind of Power Rangers, where it's got kind of both of those systems. Because Power Rangers, you have grid powers, you have grid perks, general perks, and Zord perks. And so the way that you kind of customize and make your character different from other characters, yes, your role plays part of that, but the bigger thing that's going to make your character feel unique is which combination of perks you choose to create your particular character. And so I could definitely see that being a thing here, where every time you did a die during the game, you would have built up some sort of resource, whether it's experience, whether it's actually physically picking up the things like blood shards or something like that. And then when you are building your new character, you can also burn those. But the thing is that while anything on your kind of small character, the class-based version, basically gets wiped away every time you die, anything on your large character sheet is a permanent choice. And the only way that that changes is either spending a resource to personally change it or starting a brand new family. And I kind of like the idea that you are kind of like Rogue... Is it Rogue Heroes or something like that? It's a roguelike where basically you play a character, and then when they die, one of their kids takes over. And it's a really, really fun game. They have a sequel to it, too. And I can't remember for the life of me what the game is called. But I own both of them on Steam. And they're really fun. But yeah, so like your main kind of family character sheet, that would be kind of permanent choices, or more permanent, whereas your character sheet would change every single time, and there'd be nothing related to it. And I think that could be really, really fun, especially kind of the multi-generational aspect of it, where every session could be a new generation, or every couple of sessions. And effectively, if your character dies during the session, then one thing happens. If because like let's say that you're playing with a group of 4 people, and you're doing every session is a new generation, to use simple numbers. At the end of the session, anybody that hasn't died already would get a bonus or something like that. That would let their next character be cooler or something like that, which could very quickly kind of become a lopsided party arrangement, because the ones that aren't making it to the end are getting less resources. So that would be something that would need to be play tested, so that doesn't completely break the game. But and especially the idea of death being a big part. But basically, at the end of the session, you sunset these characters, and the next generation goes. I think that could be really interesting and fun. So yeah, that's kind of my... And then the procedural generation. There are already a lot of ways to procedurally generate RPG plots and things like that. Like there are tons of ways to do it. There's a website, I think it's called Donjon. Donjon, where you can actually have them just procedurally generate you maps and things like that. There are systems like the D&D Adventure board game system. That stuff right there. They use dungeon tiles effectively, and you shuffle them akin to how you would shuffle a deck, though they're really, really thick and you can't bend them, so you wouldn't be like going or anything like that. You just kind of mix them up on the floor and then put them in. And then you lay the tiles one by one. That could very easily be a simple way to do that. Again, it would be just as simple to have tables that you roll on to kind of generate your adventures as well. But there's a lot of different ways to kind of procedurally generate things while still having kind of an overarching plot. It could be again, very kind of Castlevania-esque, where each generation is attempting to kind of storm this mega dungeon, castle, Undermountain, something like that. And one of the defining aspects of the mega dungeon is that it's constantly changing. That's how Castlevania works. And so every time they come in, it's a little bit different. That could be a really, really fun mechanic. And depending on how often it could take hundreds of years for the players to actually make it to the end, because they keep having generations. And then again, having TPKs in the middle of a session would also allow for multiple generations to happen simultaneously. And so anyway, like I said, I think this would be an insanely fun RPG system to play. And I think it would lend itself to a little bit more kind of short form content. Like I don't really see, like the campaigns I'm running right now, one of them has been running for like 5 or 6 years. Another one, or I think it's like 4 or 5 years maybe now, and then another one's been running for 8+ years. So those are long campaigns, and I think D&D in and of itself lends itself to much longer campaigns, because the system itself, if you want to go from 1 to 20, takes a long time, depending on how often you play. Whereas something like Avatar Legends lends itself to much shorter game sessions. You can only grow so much in it, and you'll eventually reach a point where there's just not really any more growth options for you. Same is true of like the Cypher system. The Cypher system, you only have quote unquote 6 levels, and each level has 4 advancements built into it. And the advancements in and of themselves are not like leveling up and getting, no, they're like, okay, we're going to increase your edge score by 1, or we're going to give you some more points for some of your pools. It's not until you reach the next tier, which is their kind of level system, that you really feel the massive amount of growth. So I think the Cypher system and other games like that lend themselves to kind of shorter form storytelling, where you're not playing for a decade, you're playing for a couple of years. So yeah, like I said, it was kind of a thought experiment that I thought was really interesting, for that kind of idea. And again, I think it could be really, really fun. Again, I've gotten a little bit burnt out on super long form campaigns. I've run, at this point, I'm running, or I have run 4 long term campaigns. My first one, Kingdom of the Kale Isles, fizzled out, but we played for like six years or something like that. Like, it was really long. We started at level 1, and I think they made it all the way up to at least tier 2. I want to say tier 3, like early tier 3, if I remember correctly. And then Legend of the Three Kingdoms has been going on for like 6 or 7 years. Traversing the Veil has been going on for at least 3 or 4. And then for Zelda Universe, Realms of the Wild was my first campaign for them, which went on for 5.5 years, and then my current one is Tears of the Realm, which we're actually going to be coming up on our 1-year anniversary in July for that. So yeah, like I'm happy doing long form stuff, but I'm starting to I really enjoy my little mini campaigns that I do in December. And probably after the campaign that's going to end next, more likely than not, just because they're already level 17, is Legend of the Three Kingdoms. Will probably be the next campaign that ends, because they're getting close to the end. They've discovered a lot of kind of plot hooks that are leading them to a final confrontation, and when that ends, I've already told my players I'm not going to be running another D&D campaign in that time slot for a little while. The first thing that's going to happen is I'm not going to run anything in that time slot. One of my players, I know I've had at least one player that has already said, yeah, they're interested in actually running in that time slot, so I would get to be a player. But even when I do start running again in that particular time slot, probably won't be running a D&D campaign unless one D&D blows my mind. Which again, I'm not anti D&D 5.5 or anything like that, which is what one D&D is, by the way. It's going to be an update to D&D 5th edition, and I already know D&D 5th edition really, really well. So unless they do something that just absolutely blows my mind, it's not that it's a bad system or anything like that, but I've been playing it. I've been playing D&D 5th edition since D&D Next. I know the system really, really well. I have bent and broken it in so many different ways that it's just not really a challenge for me to run anymore, and I want to do something that's a little bit more unique. So, getting back to the topic of this, I think a roguelike tabletop RPG could be a really awesome kind of palate cleanser style campaign, which I've talked to a few people that, either they're getting close to ending a long-term campaign, or they've gotten bored with a particular campaign. They're thinking of sunsetting, and so like, well, what should we do next? And I'm like, well, run a palate cleanser. Run a one-shot, or run a short kind of mini campaign that only lasts 4 or 6 sessions, something like that, because it will kind of revitalize your players by allowing them to make choices that they normally wouldn't make in a long-term campaign, because they don't have to worry about their character, a bad choice ruining their character for years, and it kind of gives you as a DM a creative refresh. It's one of the reasons why I do the new campaigns every December is it gives me a creative refresh to come back to my established campaigns with new ideas and uh, new things to try in my Giga campaigns. So I think a roguelike TTRPG could be a great kind of palate cleanser RPG. It could be great for I could very easily see it becoming kind of a convention staple. Because again, with a system where you basically have to make a new character every time you walk up to the table, and having your generation character sheet be there, I don't think it would be remarkably difficult to put enough rules into a living campaign system that you could turn that into kind of convention play pretty easily. Convention and game store play, where you just bring your overarching character sheet and then you come down. And you could even have particular adventures where instead of being able to choose from all of the different classes available, in this particular adventure you only get to choose from these particular classes, or in this particular adventure you have to roll for your class, so you're not allowed to pick the class itself, just the abilities of the class. Like, there could be so many different ways to do that, and it would be a great, significantly more casual style game. So yeah, this needs to be a thing, guys. It sounds super cool, and the more I talk about it, the more I think it would be insanely fun. So, game designers, get on that. I'm giving you gold. And if it wasn't for the fact that I have other stuff that I'm working on, like 3 campaigns and my own stuff that I do on my own, like, I would totally do it. But I've got other stuff to deal with. Anyway, that was just what I wanted to talk about today. So I hope you guys found this interesting. If you have ideas, first of all, if you already know of a tabletop RPG that either is kind of a roguelike or could very easily be turned into a roguelike, let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any ideas for what you would want a tabletop RPG to roguelike to look like, put those in the comments down below as well. Anyway, it's going to be all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.